The Bank of Canada wants to feature an iconic Canadian woman on its new banknotes, set to roll out in 2018. It's asking for your suggestions of who that woman should be. So far, over 18,000 nominations have been made. Submissions close April 15th. And to help narrow down that list, a banknote advisory council has been created. Aboriginal Youth Opportunities founder Michael Redhead Champagne sits on the council, and he joins us from Winnipeg this morning. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Well, I'm fascinated by this. What a huge task, really, when you have to look at so many names that are going to be submitted. Tell me what your reaction was to being included on the panel.
Well, I think it's important for people to know that my initial reaction was a little bit of hesitation, because my natural instinct that the Bank of Canada selecting an iconic Canadian woman would be selected by Canadian women. And so once I had assurities from the Bank of Canada folks that majority of the committee members would be female, then I was like, all right, well, I guess it's okay then. It's still kind of hard for me to wrap my head around what's going on here, but I do appreciate the responsibility.
And an esteemed group at that, as you mentioned. Yes, a lot of women: Margaret Conrad, Francine Decarrier, Perdita Felician. There's a number of women on it. Tell me a little bit about the criteria.
Well, what the Bank of Canada is looking for is iconic Canadian women, and there's really only two criteria. Criteria number one is, of course, that they are women who would be considered Canadian. Criteria number two is the one that seems to be causing a little bit of confusion for folks. The person has to be deceased for 25 years. So if they're alive right now, they don't count, and they have to have been deceased for 25 years in order to qualify. So a lot of the nominations that have been received have actually yielded about 120 names so far. That was released in the announcement yesterday, and so it's our responsibility now as the committee to kind of go through that and create a long list to feed back to Canadians and say, yo, Canada, what do you think of these women? And what Canada will do is give us a public opinion survey, and us as the committee then whittle that list down to a short list, which we then give to the Bank of Canada, and the government, the Minister of Finance makes the ultimate decision.
It'll be, yeah, and public submissions are being, as we mentioned, will be accepted until April 15. Tell us some of the names that, have been discussed.
Well, there have been a variety of people who have been discussed. Right now, one of the things that is really interesting is that people are nominating some folks, not only from Canadian history, but also from oral history as well. I know there are a lot of conversations I've been having with many members of the Indigenous community about how are we going to acknowledge and respect the role that some Indigenous women trailblazers have had at the creation and building up of Canada and provinces like Manitoba, and how can we overcome the gaps that are in our history books to be able to accurately acknowledge the true history of what has happened here in Canada, especially from the perspective of our women who have been nation builders since the very beginning.
Michael Redhead Champagne, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
You can have your say on which iconic woman you want to see on a banknote by submitting your suggestion online. Of course, by April 15. We'll have a link on our website.